It's a fair question to ask whether I'm a hero or just the most elaborately petty man in Southern California. The answer, like most things in life, is probably somewhere in the middle. But if you ask the residents of Whispering Pines, or the grateful parents of little Chloe Martinez, or the bewildered pilots of a U.S. Navy Seahawk helicopter, they might lean towards hero. Brenda, on the other hand, would probably have some other, more litigious words for me. But Brenda's opinion ceased to matter around the time a 2-ton military aircraft used her Range Rover as a windsock. This whole saga didn't start with a bang, but with a whimper. Specifically, the kind of quiet, existential whimper you let out on a Tuesday morning when your coffee is lukewarm, and your life, despite all its outward signs of success, feels as empty as a politician's promise. I was Jack Peterson, a man who'd traded a grease-stained Navy flight suit for the pristine, air-conditioned world of tech startups. I'd won the game. I had the glass and steel house overlooking the Pacific, the Tesla that drove itself, and a nagging sense of purposelessness that no amount of artisanal avocado toast could cure. To feel something, anything, other than the gentle hum of my server farm, I'd taken to scrolling the local news. It was on one such Tuesday, procrastinating on a conference call about synergistic monetization, that I saw it. A small headline, easily missed. Newborn critical after ambulance delay. A baby in a neighboring town, just a few miles away. Complications during birth. The ambulance got stuck in traffic. A tiny life hanging in the balance because of a bottleneck. The story hit me like a physical blow. My sister, Sarah, had a preemie a few years back. I remembered the frantic, white-knuckled drive to the hospital, the terrifying beeps and whistles of the NICU, the feeling of being utterly, terrifyingly helpless. I looked out my window, past my perfectly manicured lawn, towards Whispering Pines Boulevard. Our neighborhood was a jewel, a sun-drenched peninsula of pristine homes and immaculate landscaping. It was also a geographical trap. One road in, one road out. Every morning and every evening, that road transformed from a tranquil boulevard into a parking lot of Audis and Mercedes, a sluggish river of suburban angst. And that's when the idea, fully formed and glowing with a dangerous, incandescent light, detonated in my brain. I had land. A ridiculously large, entirely useless plot of it at the edge of my property, abutting the main road. It was a monument to poor planning and my inability to say no to a slick realtor who used words like potential and upside. It was a patch of dirt I paid a fortune to have watered. What if that useless land became the most useful place in the entire neighborhood? What if it became a dedicated neonatal ambulance bay? A clean, well-lit, easily accessible spot for a specialized ambulance to wait, poised and ready, able to scream past the traffic jam of despair and get where it needed to go. It was so simple, so elegant, so obviously, unequivocally good. I would fund the whole thing myself. It would be a rounding error in my portfolio, a philanthropic flex of the highest order. This would be my legacy. Not some app that helped people share pictures of their lunch, but something real, something that mattered. I leaned back in my chair, the California sun warming my face, and allowed myself a smug, satisfied smile. I was Jack Peterson, tech mogul, philanthropist, future savior of babies. I looked at the lonely ficus tree in the corner of my office. "What's the worst that could happen?" I murmured. The ficus, wisely, remained silent. The monthly meeting of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association was a ritual of passive aggression, a pageant of petty grievances held in a community center room that smelled faintly of stale coffee and shattered dreams. The air was thick with the tension of 100 silent wars being waged over the acceptable height of hedges and the correct shade of beige for mailbox posts. I, however, arrived as a conquering hero, armed with a PowerPoint presentation that was a masterpiece of corporate seduction. I was ready. I had slick architectural renderings of a modest, tasteful bay. I had charts and graphs detailing ambulance response times. I had a speech that was a carefully calibrated mix of passionate plea and humble brag. To seal the deal, I ended with a stock photo of a baby so cute it could probably negotiate world peace. I sat down to a smattering of polite applause. Checkmate. Then, from the back of the room, she rose. Brenda. Brenda was the HOA president, a position she wielded with the iron-fisted authority of a feudal lord. She was a woman encased in a shell of perfectly coiffed, lacquered blonde hair that looked like it could repel small arms fire. She carried a 3-ring binder, the bylaws, with the reverence a priest affords the Bible. It was her sword and her shield, her holy text in a world gone mad with unapproved satellite dishes. She let the applause die, a thin, unsmiling line where her mouth should be. She approached the podium, opened the binder with a decisive thump, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Mr. Peterson," she began, her voice a low, condescending purr that could strip paint. "A commendable, if emotional, presentation." She tapped a perfectly manicured finger on a highlighted page. "However, according to Section 7, Paragraph 4, Subsection B of the HOA bylaws, any new construction must be in aesthetic harmony with the existing neighborhood." She looked up from the sacred text, her eyes sweeping over my renderings with profound disdain. "A neonatal ambulance bay does not scream Spanish Mediterranean aesthetic, does it?" I blinked, trying to process the sheer, breathtaking audacity of the statement. "Brenda, with all due respect, we're talking about saving infants, not debating the merits of terracotta roof tiles." A murmur of agreement rippled through the polo-shirted, khaki-clad residents. I had them. For a fleeting second, reason and human decency were winning. But Brenda was a master of her dark art. "The rules are the rules, Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice rising to a register of pure, unadulterated righteousness that resonated with the fearful heart of every property value-obsessed homeowner in the room. "They protect our investment, and a medical facility, however small, will inevitably bring undesirables to our community. Think of the sirens, the traffic, the element it will attract." And just like that, she'd done it. In less than a minute, she had masterfully pivoted from the noble cause of saving dying babies to a terrifying vision of a horde of undesirables, presumably in loud, aesthetically displeasing ambulances, laying siege to their suburban paradise. The conversation was no longer about life and death. It was about noise pollution and resale value. The motion was tabled, pending a thorough review by the Architectural Committee, a committee that Brenda naturally chaired. It was a death sentence, and we both knew it. The opening salvo of the Cold War was fired 3 days later. I found it tucked under the wiper of my Tesla, a single, crisply folded piece of paper. It was a printout of the HOA bylaws regarding unapproved structures, with entire paragraphs highlighted in a furious, vibrating pink that screamed, "I mean business." As I plucked it from my windshield, a silent, humming electric golf cart glided to a stop beside me. It was Brenda, clad in a head-to-toe Lululemon ensemble that probably cost more than my first car. A smug little smile played on her lips. "Just a friendly reminder, Jack," she chirped, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We wouldn't want any misunderstandings." "The only thing I misunderstand, Brenda," I shot back, crumbling the paper in my fist, "is how you sleep at night. Do you have tiny rule-book-shaped sheep you count?" Her smile didn't waver. It was terrifying. Any attempt to start construction will be met with swift and decisive action. The HOA has a substantial legal fund. Have a lovely day. She hummed away, leaving me in a cloud of smug satisfaction and the faint scent of expensive sunscreen. I stood there, fuming. The conventional path was a dead end, blocked by a 5'4" wall of pure, weaponized bureaucracy. The right way wasn't an option, so I'd have to choose the other way. The fun way. If I was going to build this thing, I needed to go underground. I needed a team that saw rules less as commandments and more as gentle and entirely optional suggestions. My first call was to Manny. Manny was a contractor of the old school. His knuckles were scarred, his t-shirts were permanently stained with something that looked like wood varnish, and his relationship with city permits was best described as, "It's complicated." I'd designed a website for his construction business a few years back, pro bono, after his kid had a health scare. He owed me. He specialized in what he called creative construction solutions, which I understood to be a euphemism for don't ask, don't tell, and for God's sake, don't write anything down. I met him at a Greasy Spoon diner downtown, a place where the coffee was strong and the waitresses called everyone hun. Over a plate of eggs that looked like they'd been cooked on the hood of a car, I laid out the plan. Manny listened patiently, chewing on a piece of bacon, his brow furrowed in concentration. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "So, let me get this straight," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You want me to build a secret, illegal, life-saving baby garage right under the nose of the HOA queen from hell?" "Essentially, yes." Manny was silent for a long moment. I watched as a slow grin spread across his face, a beautiful, conspiratorial smile. "I'll need my guys." Your guys turned out to be Leo and Sal, a pair of identical twins who looked like they'd been chiseled out of granite and then decorated by a biker gang's resident artist. They ran a landscaping and demolition company, and their arms were a tapestry of swirling, colorful tattoos. They were men of few words and many muscles, and they moved with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from being able to lift a small car. I pitched them the idea in my garage, amidst the lawnmowers and power tools. I hadn't even finished the part about Brenda when Leo, the slightly more talkative of the two, cut me off. "I'm in," he said, his voice a deep bass. "I hate that lady. She once tried to fine me because my truck had excessive mud on the tires." "Yeah," Sal added, nodding his massive shaven head. "She said it disrupted the visual tranquility of the street." And so, the fellowship was formed. A disillusioned tech millionaire, a rogue contractor with a heart of gold, and two brawny, vengeance-seeking twins with a grudge. Our mission, which we all chose to accept, Operation Baby Bay. What could possibly go wrong? Our first night of construction was a ballet of barely controlled chaos. We moved like a team of suburban ninjas, cloaked in darkness and fueled by a shared sense of righteous indignation. The plan, hatched over cheap beer and Manny's hand-drawn schematics, was to work from the witching hour of midnight to the pre-dawn hush of 4 a.m. We had sound-dampening blankets, a small arsenal of battery-powered electric tools, and me. I was the eye in the sky, the mission commander perched on the flat roof of my garage with a pair of high-tech night vision goggles and a gamer headset, sipping a venti cold brew like a sleep-deprived Bond villain directing his minions. "Okay, Manny, the mini-excavator is clear to engage," I whispered into the mic, my voice a dramatic rasp. "Leo, Sal, you're on lookout, and for the love of God, if you see Brenda's porch light come on, hit the deck like your life depends on it, because it probably does." "Roger that, boss," Sal's voice crackled back, tinny and distant. "We're ghosts." The problem with ghosts is that they're not usually operating a half-ton piece of machinery. The supposedly whisper-quiet generator we'd rented coughed to life with a sputtering roar that sounded suspiciously like a Harley-Davidson clearing its throat after a long night. I nearly tumbled off the roof in sheer panic. A few minutes later, Sal, in a moment of overzealous excavation, caught the edge of a row of prize-winning azaleas that bordered my property, sending a shower of dirt, roots, and vibrant pink petals into the night air. "Sal, the azaleas," I hissed into the headset. "Those were my emotional support shrubs. Brenda will notice." "Collateral damage, boss," he grunted back, the sound of shoveling punctuating his words. "War is hell." Brenda, meanwhile, was not idle. You don't get to be the undisputed tyrant of a luxury HOA by being unobservant. She knew something was afoot. She could feel a disturbance in the force of her perfectly regulated neighborhood. She began taking late-night constitutional strolls, her little electric golf cart humming almost silently down the street, her beady eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of non-compliance. Then came the ultimate escalation. She installed a new, top-of-the-line security camera on the corner of her house, its unblinking infrared lens aimed directly at my property. It was a declaration of war. This called for a countermeasure of equal, if not greater, absurdity. This called for Manny's magnum opus. "I've got it," he announced one afternoon, as we huddled in the relative safety of my garage, which now served as our unofficial war room. He unrolled a blueprint on the hood of my Tesla. "We fight deception with deception. We're going to hide the construction site in plain sight." His idea was either the work of a certified genius or a complete lunatic. He had commissioned a massive, custom-printed tarp from a company that usually made backdrops for Hollywood movies. But this wasn't just any tarp. It was a high-resolution, photorealistic image of a pristine, immaculately manicured lawn, complete with the shadows of a few tastefully placed, and crucially, HOA-approved garden gnomes. During the day, we would stretch this masterpiece of subterfuge over the entire construction site. From a distance, from Brenda's spy camera, it would look like nothing had changed. It would look like my yard was still a boring, useless, but perfectly compliant patch of grass. The first time we deployed the lawn tarp, it was a revelation. It was ridiculous. It was audacious. It was beautiful. My life fell into a new, bizarre rhythm. By day, I was Jack Peterson, tech CEO, attending Zoom meetings and talking about synergy. By night, I was Eagle Eye, the rooftop commander of a clandestine construction crew, my nights a blur of whispered commands and near misses. "Brenda's on the move," I'd murmur into the headset from my rooftop perch, watching her golf cart creep down the street like a predatory golf cart. "She's got the binoculars again. Everyone look natural. Leo, for the love of God, stop using that shovel as an air guitar." From below, I could just make out the faint, muffled sound of Leo's baritone. "I'm just a poor boy. Nobody loves me." "He's singing Queen," I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose as I watched Brenda's silhouette stare intently at my fake lawn. Of course he is. The law, when it finally came knocking, arrived not with a bang, but with a polite, almost apologetic chime of my doorbell. I was in the middle of a conference call, passionately explaining the disruptive potential of our new algorithm, when my security system pinged. On the monitor, I saw them. Two of San Diego's finest, standing on my porch, looking bored and slightly wilted by the afternoon sun. I excused myself from the call, smoothed my hair, composed my face into a mask of polite bewilderment, and opened the door. "Jack Peterson," the older of the two asked. He had a magnificent, sorrowful mustache that had clearly seen better days and a name tag that read Miller. His partner was a fresh-faced kid named Davis, who looked so young he probably still had a curfew. "That's me," I said, flashing what I hoped was a winning, non-criminal smile. "What can I do for you, officers?" "We received an anonymous tip," Miller said, his gaze drifting past me, his eyes methodically scanning the property behind me. "About some unpermitted construction." "A tip?" I feigned an almost comical level of surprise. "Here, officers, my most ambitious construction project lately has been assembling an IKEA bookshelf. And let me tell you, the instructions were challenging. A true test of the human spirit." I invited them in. They were hesitant, but I insisted. I gave them the grand tour. I showed them my pristine kitchen with its chrome appliances, my minimalist living room with its uncomfortable but very expensive Italian sofa, and my perfectly normal backyard. The lawn tarp was performing its duties flawlessly, shimmering in the afternoon sun like a patch of unusually vibrant, two-dimensional grass. "So," Miller said, taking a sip of the icy espresso I'd pressed into his hand. He swirled it, looking at me over the rim of the tiny cup. "Your neighbor, a Brenda, says you're building some kind of secret medical facility?" I let out a hearty, dismissive laugh. "Brenda? Oh, bless her heart. Her imagination is her most vibrant quality. A true visionary. The only facility I'm building is a stronger relationship with my Nespresso machine. Can I get you a refill?" They left, their expressions a perfect blend of suspicion and apathy. Miller, the veteran, gave me a long, hard look as he walked away. A look that said, "I know you're full of it, but I have actual crimes to deal with, and arguing about HOA violations is not how I want to spend my Tuesday." I closed the door, my heart hammering against my ribs, and leaned against it, a giddy, triumphant laugh bubbling up in my chest. We'd dodged a bullet, but the victory was short-lived. That same afternoon, the phone rang. It was Sarah, not my sister, but Sarah Jenkins, a no-nonsense hospital administrator who had become my covert ally in this whole insane endeavor. She had been the one to provide the specs for the bay, her excitement barely concealed by her professional demeanor. "Jack," she said, and the usual warmth in her voice was gone, replaced by a tight knot of concern. "We've got a problem. The National Weather Service just issued a severe storm warning. A big one. It's supposed to hit the coast at the end of the week. You know what that does to the Peninsula Road?" I did. One drop of rain in San Diego and the entire county forgot how to drive. Whispering Pines Boulevard, our only lifeline, would become a stagnant parking lot. "We were really hoping the bay would be ready," she continued, her voice low. "We've got 2 high-risk pregnancies in your area, Jack. Both due any day." The air went out of my lungs. Suddenly, this wasn't a game anymore. It wasn't about outsmarting Brenda or the illicit thrill of our clandestine operation. It was about those 2 babies. The deadline was no longer an abstract concept. It was real, it was terrifying, and it was 72 hours away. "We'll be ready," I told Sarah, my voice a mask of confidence I didn't feel. "I promise." I hung up the phone and immediately called an emergency meeting of the fellowship in the garage. The time for stealth and subtlety was over. The time for caution was past. We were going to finish this thing, come hell, high water, or a 5'4" hurricane of pure spite named Brenda. The final push was a 72-hour blur of caffeine, adrenaline, and the controlled chaos that is modern construction under extreme duress. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by the constant hum of power tools, the scent of fresh concrete, and the ever-present fear of discovery. We abandoned the pretense of a full night's sleep, working in frantic, high-energy bursts, a well-oiled machine of defiance. Manny was a maestro in steel-toed boots, conducting his symphony of concrete and rebar with grunts and hand signals. Leo and Sal were dynamos, human forklifts powered by energy drinks, and a deep, abiding desire to stick it to the man, or in this case, the woman. Their muscles strained as they hoisted beams, dug trenches, and smoothed concrete under the harsh glare of portable work lights. I was the quartermaster, the logistics chief, the frazzled commander running on fumes. My job was to keep the coffee flowing, the pizza orders coming, and our morale from cratering. We had close calls that aged me a decade. On the second night, Brenda, ever vigilant, was clearly suspicious of the faint, muffled noises that even our sound blankets couldn't completely absorb. Around 3 a.m., my motion sensor pinged on my phone. I scrambled to the monitor and my blood ran cold. There she was, a ghostly figure on her porch. Wrapped in a pink silk robe and holding were those night vision goggles. The kind you buy from the back of a spy magazine? "Freeze!" I whisper-yelled into the headset, my voice cracking with panic. "She's got eyes on! I repeat, Brenda has night vision!" Below me, the entire crew froze in place like a bizarre tableau of startled garden statues. Leo was halfway up a ladder, a paint roller still dripping white paint in his hand. Sal was crouched over a wiring conduit, a pair of pliers in his fist. I think Manny stopped breathing for a full 2 minutes. We waited, motionless, under the cyclopean gaze of Brenda's goggles for what felt like an eternity, before she finally seemed satisfied and retreated back into her house. But as the first faint blush of dawn began to bleed into the sky on the third day, a sense of weary, battered triumph settled over us. It was done. The bay was finished. We rolled up the lawn tarp for the last time, not with stealth, but with a kind of ceremony. It revealed a pristine, perfectly paved, beautifully lit ambulance bay. It was a thing of beauty, a concrete testament to our collective insanity and sleep deprivation. We stood there, 4 exhausted, grime-covered men, admiring our handiwork as the first hints of the storm began to gather on the horizon. My phone rang, the shrill sound cutting through the morning calm. It was Sarah from the hospital. Her voice was stripped of all pleasantries. It was pure, unadulterated urgency. "Jack, it's happening. A woman in your neighborhood, a Mrs. Martinez. Her water just broke. It's a preemie, 34 weeks. The storm's already hitting the coast. Traffic is a total nightmare. We need the bay, now. The neonatal ambulance is 5 minutes from your location." As if on cue, a fat drop of rain hit my forehead. Then another. And in the distance, carried on the wind, I heard the faint, unmistakable wail of a siren, just as the first real sheets of rain began to fall, lashing against the new asphalt. Brenda made her move. She must have been watching, waiting for her moment. The final, dramatic confrontation. With a self-righteous squeal of tires, she whipped her gleaming white Range Rover, a vehicle the size of a small African nation, directly in front of the entrance to the bay, its bulk completely blocking our path. She got out, her arms crossed, her face a mask of triumphant fury. It was the last stand of the HOA queen, the final battle in the war for Whispering Pines. "Brenda!" I yelled, my voice hoarse, running towards her with my exhausted crew right behind me. The rain was plastering my hair to my head. "What in God's name are you doing? Move that oversized grocery getter right now!" "This is an unapproved structure," she shrieked, her voice somehow cutting through the rising wind. "It is in direct violation of multiple covenants. I am making a citizen's arrest. You are all trespassing on common property." "That's not how citizens' arrests work," Manny yelled, his face, already ruddy from exhaustion, turning a deep shade of crimson. "And this is for a baby, a tiny, helpless human baby who needs to get to a hospital." "The bylaws!" Brenda screamed, her lacquered hair finally beginning to succumb to the humidity, a few strands breaking free in a wild dance. Make no exception for babies. The siren was closer now, a desperate, pulsing cry against the drumming of the storm. We were out of time. We were out of options. My mind raced, frantically sifting through possibilities. Hotwire her car? Bodily remove her and her smug sense of entitlement? My eyes darted around, looking for a solution, any solution, a miracle. And then, in a moment of sheer divine desperation, my sleep-addled brain dredged up a memory from the depths of my past. A memory of a wild-eyed, adrenaline junkie of a helicopter pilot who owed me a life debt after a particularly ill-advised night of shore leave in Bahrain that involved a stolen goat and the local constabulary. Crazy Rick. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slipping on the wet screen. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but a quick search told me he was now Chief Petty Officer Rick Guns Riley, stationed at Naval Air Station North Island, just across the bay. I prayed he hadn't changed his number. He picked up on the second ring. "Guns!" I yelled into the phone over the wind. "It's Jack Peterson." "Jack! What the hell? It's 6 in the morning." "Rick, I know this is insane, but I am calling in that favor, the Bahrain favor. I need you to fly a helicopter over my house. Right now." There was a stunned silence on the other end, punctuated by the distant sound of rotors. "Jack, is that you? Are you drunk again?" "No time to explain, just trust me. I need you to scare the hell out of a woman in a white Range Rover, low and slow. Make it dramatic. I'm texting you the coordinates." I could almost hear the reckless, familiar grin in his voice. Consider that Bahrain goat incident officially expunged from the record. I'm 5 minutes out. Hope she's not wearing a toupee." 2 minutes later, the world changed. The sound wasn't the approaching siren anymore. It was a deep, guttural whoomp 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 that vibrated in my teeth, a sound that shook the very ground beneath my feet. Everyone, me, my crew, even Brenda, looked up. A dark gray MH-60S Seahawk helicopter descended from the bruised, stormy sky like an avenging angel from a Michael Bay movie. It didn't just fly over, it stopped. It came to a full, terrifying hover, 50 feet directly above Brenda's pristine white SUV, a 2-ton beast of steel and fury hanging in the air. The rotor wash was not wind, it was a physical force. It was a hurricane. Rain flew sideways in blinding sheets. Loose leaves, twigs, a neighbor's rogue garbage can, and Brenda's Community Watch captain visor were blasted down the street as if fired from a cannon. Her precious Range Rover, her 4-wheeled symbol of suburban dominance, rocked violently on its suspension, its car alarm beginning to shriek in a symphony of terror and protest. The noise was a solid wall of sound, a deafening, terrifying roar that drowned out the storm, the siren, everything. I risked a glance at Brenda. Her face was a cinematic masterpiece of rapidly shifting emotions. Her smug confidence dissolved into confusion, which morphed into righteous indignation, which was then utterly obliterated by raw, primal terror. Her mouth opened in a shriek that was completely lost in the maelstrom. She scrambled back into her car with all the grace of a startled crab, fumbling with the keys, and peeled out, her tires screeching on the wet asphalt as she fled the wrath of the Navy. And just like that, the path was clear. The Seahawk, its mission of mercy, or intimidation, accomplished, tipped its nose, ascended with a final, thunderous roar, and vanished back into the storm clouds as mysteriously as it had arrived. A moment later, the neonatal ambulance, its lights flashing, pulled smoothly into the bay we had built. The 2 paramedics in the front stared, wide-eyed, at the scene. The one in the passenger seat just shook his head and gave me a slow, grateful thumbs up before he and his partner disappeared into the back to do their real work. Minutes later they were gone, the baby safely on its way to the hospital, the sound of its siren finally fading into the rain-swept afternoon. Just as my heart rate was returning to something resembling a normal rhythm, another set of flashing lights appeared. It was Officers Miller and Davis, their patrol car sliding to a stop in the street. They had clearly been escorting the ambulance. They got out, their faces grim, and took in the scene. Me and my crew, soaking wet and grinning like lunatics. The pristine, brand-new ambulance bay, and the empty, rain-slicked space where Brenda's SUV had been just moments before. Officer Miller slowly tilted his head back, his mustache dripping, and stared at the roiling gray sky. Was that a military helicopter? I plastered on my most innocent, angelic smile. Weather patterns are just crazy today, aren't they, officer? That wind was something else. Almost blew my hat off. Davis, the rookie, ever diligent, leaned towards his partner. Sir, should I write a report about the helicopter? Miller let out a long, weary sigh, the sigh of a man who was profoundly underpaid to deal with this level of suburban insanity. He rubbed his temples. No, Davis, no. There was no helicopter. There was just a strong gust of wind, and a very timely departure. He gave me one last, long look, a look that held a universe of grudging respect and a profound desire to never, ever have to deal with me or my neighborhood again. Let's just go. The next day, the storm had passed, and the sun was out. Whispering Pines was a changed world. The story of the secret baby bay and the phantom helicopter had spread with the speed and intensity of a wildfire. I was, to my astonishment, a local legend. Neighbors who had previously only ever given me curt, suspicious nods were now stopping by with freshly baked pies, with 6 packs of craft beer, with their own stories of petty tyrannies enacted by Brenda. I learned about the war over the unapproved bird bath, the Great Flamingo Incident of '22, and the brutal crackdown on incorrectly sorted recycling. I was a hero. I was a liberator. The parents of the baby, a healthy, beautiful little girl they named Chloe, called me from the hospital, their voices thick with tears of gratitude. That one phone call was worth more than every stock option I'd ever vested. Of Brenda, there was no sign. Her house was dark, her Range Rover gone. The neighborhood rumor mill, which operated with the speed and efficiency of a Wall Street trading floor, whispered that she was on an extended, unscheduled visit to her sister in a small, quiet town in Arizona. A town, I noted with some satisfaction, with no HOA. The Homeowners Association itself was in a state of open rebellion. An emergency meeting had been called to discuss leadership changes. It promised to be a bloodbath. That afternoon, I hosted a celebratory barbecue in my backyard. It was just me, Manny, Leo, and Sal. We were sore, we were exhausted, and we were ridiculously, childishly proud of ourselves. So what's next, boss? Sal asked, expertly flipping a burger with a pair of tongs. We build a secret, illegal fire station? Leo chimed in, a beer in his hand. Nah, a landing pad for that helicopter. You know, for emergencies. I laughed, a real deep laugh that came from my gut. I looked at the team we'd become, a bizarre collection of misfits who had, against all odds, done a genuinely good thing. Let's just enjoy this one for a bit, guys, I said. I think I've annoyed the neighborhood enough for 1 year. A few weeks later, life had settled back into its comfortable rhythm, but something inside me had fundamentally shifted. The boredom, the vague, gnawing sense of unfulfillment that had haunted my sun-drenched, successful days, was gone. It had been replaced by something else, something warm and solid. I'd found a new kind of purpose, one that didn't show up on a quarterly report or a stock ticker. I was in my home office one afternoon, looking out at the peaceful, tree-lined streets of Whispering Pines, when an old, familiar restlessness began to stir in my chest. It wasn't boredom anymore. It was potential. On a whim, I pulled up a satellite map on my main monitor. I zoomed out from our little peninsula, across the glittering bay, to a different part of the city. A part that didn't have whispering pines or manicured lawns. I found what I was looking for. A rundown, neglected community park, a sad little patch of brown in a sea of concrete and apartment buildings. A familiar, mischievous grin spread across my face. I opened a new file and began to sketch, laying out plans, imagining the possibilities. "Okay," I muttered to my ficus, who seemed to stand a little taller these days. A secret, illegal playground, with a state-of-the-art splash pad and a solar-powered snow cone machine. I leaned back in my chair, the thrill of a new, absurdly noble project coursing through me. The possibilities were endless. The challenge was immense. The local bureaucracy would be a nightmare. I smiled. "What's the worst that could happen?"